There's a little delay, and there it is. I see the thing that says live right there. Okay. Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's me, Bill Patton, and I'm with
Dave Smith. Hey,
That's
everybody.
good. And see, we're a lot more polished about that whole thing right there. It's just
Takes years of practice.
It takes years. It does. It does. It takes a long time to get all that stuff right. So today's conversation is going to be about team evaluation, reflective coaching, and planning for future success. So, you know, when I went to go teach school, I went and did my teacher credential program, and that's where I became familiar with the concept of reflective teaching. And so it's not particularly complicated, but it is an amazingly good discipline to have where, when you get done with your day, to just take a few minutes to just think about, what went well, what did not go well, what's a problem that needs to be solved the next day, and just, take a little inventory. And then, right now, most of you are at the end of your season or it's completely over. And it's a good time while it's fresh in your mind to, think about how did the season go? All right. So, Dave, when you're looking back on a season and sort of evaluating your team, what are some of the things that you think about?
Well, one of the most important aspects is not only your own impression of your season and, like you said, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the season, perhaps, hopefully mostly good. But here's one thing that I started years ago in Arizona back 30 years ago. I had my administration. I actually created a survey, but I had a very short 3-question, I think 4-question review for parents at the banquet, and handed those out. We had pencils for everybody, and I did it from the administrative standpoint because I didn't want them to feel like I was asking them directly. I wanted them to give unbiased feedback on how they interpreted the season for the administration, say the athletic director or whatever, to have for their coaching, as if they did it for all their coaches. Now I know a lot of athletic directors started doing this after I started doing it because I think it's just a great idea. But the idea of having feedback, how did you feel coach provided for your child? How did you feel the overall season went? And then of course a comment section of what would you suggest or would you think of as far as ideas for the betterment of the team. So that's one thing, and the banquet is a great place. Now the other one is a survey for the players, and so those two feedbacks are going to give you so much hopefully honest feedback that you can now be you can be more objective, less subjective in terms of saying, oh, I hadn't thought that they were interpreting something, or I wasn't very clear, or I wasn't treating them fairly, whatever they may feed back. And hopefully you get a lot of accolades and things that you've earned. We never get as many of those as I believe we deserve if you're a really good coach and a coach that is sincerely dedicated to your team. It's amazing. Some kids will surprise you. Some parents will surprise you and just, unleash a heart of thanks. And then others, not so much. So anyway, those are initially, I'll say, a survey to take in the account of your season from their perspective, not just your own.
Yes. So, yeah. And, while you were talking, you spurred me on again, as you often do. And, I like surveys, but I think, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because if you have a survey where the people put their name on it, they're probably going to hold back on some negative or so-called even constructive criticism. And it's sad to me that people can't just, do that. I mean, I feel like I'm pretty good at putting my name on stuff and saying, hey, I would like to see you get better this way. But then I'm a coach. So, hey, and that's why not everybody's a coach. So, but if you do anonymous, then you get sort of you can unleash this really mean spirited thing, and you can get your feelings hurt. Because people will be like, oh, nobody knows what I'm writing. I'm gonna say all the worst stuff. In fact, just for fun, I'm gonna make up some stuff. Um, and so that can happen too. It's pretty sad. So, you know, choose your poison. It's going to be one way or the other. What I try to develop with my players and my parents is that trust level where they know they can come to me and tell me what they're thinking. One of the best things that has ever happened in my career happened in the late 90s. And I had this girl come up to me and say, hey, coach, I know you think you're funny. And I know you think you're funny. And, you have that, great sarcastic wit and what have you, but not everybody understands it. And so, I know I don't particularly like it when you're sarcastic with me. And, some of the other players don't. So I just wanted to let you know. And I was like, wow, that was awesome. And, I can honestly say, and so, and I said, Jenny, you know what? I'm going to tone it down. And I'm also going to, I think, do a better job of reading the room and seeing, who enjoys it and who doesn't. So that was pretty big. And, I've never stopped being sarcastic, but because of that, it made me more sensitive to, do I have an audience here or not? I mean, are they enjoying it? Do they get it? If they don't, then that's not a good thing. The other thing too is that, it's good to stop and sort of evaluate what is the culture of the place where you're at, because every school, every team has a different culture. And it's also good to track how it changes, because, you get a new principal in at the school and the culture of the school can change dramatically. And I'll give one example. There was a principal at a school that came in and he announced over the loudspeaker, tell me what you don't want for lunch by littering the package that it comes in. So the next day he says, today there will be no pizza because there are too many pizza wrappers left in the quad, and it was like a collective groan came over the campus. Ah, no pizza. Right. But what it did is it made people, and everything got cleaner. So that year I just saw really a big jump in sort of the personal responsibility of the kids, and so we as coaches in our own little domain there as well, we also need to, be able to, create a cultural shift. So, but first, know what your culture is, and then realize what do you need to do to make that culture shift to something that's better.
Yeah, new coaches have got to be a little careful because they've not established that culture or recognized that culture yet, and you're on the pedestal of being viewed by everybody in a magnifying glass of, and if you're over the top sarcastic or over the top trying to be funny or over the top trying to be a disciplinarian, that can really backfire, if you will, until those players get to know you. And so new coaches need to be clear, distinct, have great communication, and then let the personality, you and I both have probably similar, but yeah, you're more a sarcastic guy. I throw in, the Davisms, you throw in the Billisms. That kids, in fact, two of my students made T-shirts that have quotes from me, like like you have quotes of things you said, funny things that Coach Bill said. So be a little careful when you're starting out to feel your way through until you can really, if you go over the top, you're going to lose your players, you're going to lose their respect, because if you're trying to be too much of something, it won't usually work.
Yeah. No, I have to correct you because when we play tennis Jeopardy, it's dumb stuff,
Dumb
coach
stuff.
says.
Okay, sorry.
Dumb stuff, coach
I was
says.
trying to be
No, and
nice.
so see, I'm opening the door for them to give it back.
Right. Yeah,
You
I
know,
think that's a
so I
great.
mean,
Yep.
if you're going to have a sense of humor, you better have a sense of humor because the
Yep.
kids are going to come back with some stuff.
Well, and that's
Right.
why my player survey cards are anonymous, as well as my parents' ones, by the way. So
Yeah.
that's why I mentioned the administration is creating the survey, so it's not like it's coming to me, although it is coming to me. But
Right.
the player survey, I always had two things. I say list two things you loved about the season, list two things you would like to do differently.
Yeah.
I
No.
wouldn't say things you don't like, because there's always something you don't like, but it's inevitable. You have to do certain things if you're going to produce a championship team. But two things that you would like to see different, or that we didn't do, or whatever. But those are that, back in if we're evaluating a season, we need feedback. And if you're
Yes.
not creating an objective feedback mechanism, then you're not going to get objective feedback.
Right. Well, you need it. Yeah, you need it from the players and the parents, but you even more need it internally. You yourself, I myself need to go, all right, what went well this season?
Sure.
And where did I fail? Were there any places that I failed or I felt like I could have done better? Were there any special circumstances that just changed things? Like it rained for 2 solid weeks, right? So okay, or a player got hurt, or something happened and people are gone, or or there was a lesson that I was trying to teach and I stuck with it too long. It wasn't taking, and I over prioritized something. So next time around, if I'm teaching something and the lesson's just not taking, then I'm going to move on more quickly, and then I think looking back also, if you can stop and go to each player individually and see, I like to do this stuff more interpersonally. I like to go to that kid and say, hey, did you have fun this year? And what could have been better? Where did we have successes? What could we have done better? And, it also is a great way to build the relationship. And then the message is you've shown that you're ready to get that feedback.
Well, and
that
you value their feedback by doing it that way too.
Right. And then also I think you're also building in more maturity in the players when they actually have to talk to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's a really big mission. One thing that's a big part of my mission is to be a part of that team kid, but so between parents and coaches and the players themselves, producing an adult, producing somebody who's gained skills that they can live, that they can go to college and already be well on their way to adulthood, so they don't have like this prolonged adolescence. Right. Because you're expecting them to communicate with you. So that's kind of a big thing. And then, looking at them just purely as tennis players, how did we succeed on the court? Did we have all the strokes that we needed? Was there some commonality among my team of something that we didn't perform well? Well, let's make that a high priority for next year. How did we grow in our ability to play tactically? How was our mental game? And then, how each player differs along those lines, So, in fact, it was in the evaluation of one team that I just realized, I'm not coming back next year, because I was a little burnt out. I'd been at the school for 6 years, and there were a lot of things at the school going on that I didn't like. And then I had the two main people who were going to be the so-called leadership of the next year. I was like, they're just not getting it. So I was like, okay, I think it might be time for me to go on and go back to teaching privately again for a bit. And because if I know my heart's not in it, and I know that I'm already somewhat frustrated with these people, it's not going to do anybody good for me to be pushing myself through that and not really having that joy of doing it. So that could be part of the evaluation process is, do I still fit here?
Right. Sorry, my dogs are going to be barking.
They're welcome to do that.
They're
Woof, woof, woof.
they're resurfacing our street. So I'm going to mute this. I'm going to hold on a second. Okay.
It's okay. I will bark with them. Woof, woof, woof. Everybody in the audience who's listening right now, bark along with Dave's dogs.
Okay. Just go out, bark outside. I'll be fine. Anyway.
Highly interactive today.
Moving on to another dimension is I have a saying that says your next season begins at the banquet for the previous season. And so how you approach your banquet, how you honor your players, how you interact with the parents, because a lot of times you have a parent meeting at the beginning of the season, then you don't see them until the banquet.
Right.
And so, or I always had a parent player party at my house with, luckily I had a big enough house where we'd have 120 players and parents. So it was nice because you saw a different side of the parents and the players when you brought them into a social environment rather than just a meeting or on the court thing. So, but that's what a lot of things. I get really frustrated when I talk to coaches who don't treat the banquet with the high degree of importance. And a lot of them are like they pass out some certificates, they have some pizza, and then thanks, great year, out of here.
Right.
And our banquets are very elaborate. We have a slideshow. It's usually about a 10 or 15-minute slideshow because I always have gazillion pictures taken by me or my parents or whoever, music and whatnot. One year I had my band play, which was a really fun thing for me and for them to see me in a totally different environment from coaching. But the idea of the banquet itself, I have a list of things here that your banquet should include, and one of which is get the parents involved. Is make sure you identify what your off season and training that you're going to do in the summer, and is done during that time. A lot of coaches will wait until after school's out, and then they have no way to communicate with those players. So, hang on a second.
Your dogs are not really a problem, but if you want to take a pause, you can.
No, I didn't know how loud they were.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's just a little background noise. No big deal.
Make sure you establish, pass out resources. So how do they get their USTA card? How do they? And this should obviously be at the beginning of the season too. But your UTR, how to go on YouTube. I always pull up a bunch of YouTube or URLs that say, hey, check the forehand, backhand, whatever.
Yeah.
We always get flowers for our senior moms. We always have dog tags made for our senior players graduating. We always have a backdrop of the school logo that, like you see the pros do, where you can get pictures together. And
nice.
So those are just a few things that, you've got to make sure you communicate hey, what are we doing next, and not wait till unless you're just a coach at either there are some school districts that don't allow any coaching in the off season, which is about as dumb as it gets, but you have to deal with the rules.
Right.
I marvel at schools that approach it that way, because the only people that are going to get better are the wealthy people who can afford the private coaches and the lessons. If a high school coach is willing to go out there and do off-season, clinics, practices, Grand Prix, Super Saturday, things that we've talked about in the past, that's just unfortunate. But and then of course you don't have all coaches are not. They may have other priorities, so they can't even give up any time during the summer, which I find hard to believe. But there are coaches that can't perhaps do that. I would evaluate myself if I couldn't create times that I could interact with my players in the off season and make sure they're still motivated. I probably wouldn't be coaching. Just you're not coaching material for the most part.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I wholeheartedly agree with the whole thing about the banquet is really an opportunity to set the tone for a future season. And I usually like to have like a little maximum 10-minute speech, and so it's thank you, and good work, and blah blah blah. And then what were the lessons from the season? What did we learn? How did you grow? Because when we remember at the beginning when we played that team and blank happened, and then later then you played that team again and it was like this, and then they go, oh yeah. I mean, because I don't know, teenagers don't necessarily take the lessons from the whole thing. They don't necessarily see them growing. It's kind of like, I sometimes tell them, it's like the pimple on your face. You're worried about it. You think it looks terrible. And then the other kids got one, but you don't even notice theirs. And they're just worried about theirs. They're not looking at yours, right? And it's funny, if you just leave it alone, in a couple of weeks, it's gone. It got better. It changed. And so, it's kind of like when we look in the mirror every day, we don't see the minute changes happening. So I had one really interesting thing where we had a team, a girls team that came into playoffs as a 10 seed, and we had a very dramatic 4-3 win over the 7 seed, and then we had a super dramatic win over the number 2 seeds. But then we were just out of gas. We had nothing left, and we lost to the fifth seed in the semifinals. So, but during the season, the girls had done all these things to compromise their energy levels. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but they did so much drama. That was so much energy wasted on things didn't have to be. And so that was the lesson. I was like, now look, girls, if you learn to have a little bit more balanced lifestyle, now you're in contention to actually win this thing. And the interesting thing was, the next year I didn't coach them, but the coach was a friend of mine, and the girls took that to heart, and they entered the playoffs as the number 1 seed, and they just destroyed everybody. I mean, no one was close to them. So they really took that lesson to heart and used it moving forward. And now, let's say you're out there, and I've coached teams full of beginners, right? And so you have this team, and so many of the kids are beginners, and then they became tennis players. You can say, look, when you came, you didn't even know how to play at all, right? And now you're a legitimate tennis player. Congratulations, right? Now, think about, do you just want to take it up a notch? You want to try to win more matches and get a little bit better, because, honestly, you have an opportunity if you keep going like this. I mean, you could play junior college tennis. You could do this, you could do that. I mean, you can play club tennis when you go to school, and just be a lifelong tennis player. I mean, that's so, try to feeding the vision for different levels, not just, elite level, winning your section or winning your state, that kind of stuff, but the, growing the game of tennis through that.
Players,
I want to shift gears here. Let me
go ahead.
You can keep going with that, but I'm going to introduce the new topic, and then you can decide if you want to keep going that way. Anyway, so now as we reflect on, let's spend a couple more minutes on the reflective practices of coaching just internally, and then also then start looking. We're going to move on shortly after that into planning for future success. So what was that thing you were going to say?
Well, a very short thing to add to that. I tell every one of my players, there's only 7 of you are going to make varsity on any given year. And I've got 54 girls or 52 or whatever, however many girls or boys I've got. But the thing I tell every one of them, you're all going to be skilled tennis players for the rest of your life, from our program. And some of you are going to work your butts off to make it to the top 7. Some of you are going to fall short for whatever reason. Could be some of the things you talked about, Bill, in terms of your lifestyle, priorities, how you handle your health, your fitness, all those other variables that contribute to a championship player. So really the bottom line is they will all be highly skilled players when they come out of our programs. And so that's very motivating, especially to a parent, because I think a parent is more in tune with how do I want to ensure the success of my child for their lifetime. Well, we're giving them, and this is where a lot of parents, a lot of players don't recognize how important our role is as their coach. If we're a good coach and we're teaching them highly skilled tennis, as I know you do, I do, other coaches do, those coaches and those players are going to be very successful. Will they win state every year? There's too many variables to identify that. Will you compete every year? Yes. You will be in the contention if you do the things that we've talked about. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add to that.
Yeah. So I wanted to give one piece of reflective coaching. So when I get my schedule out, and I try to get as many competitions as I possibly can, because kids want to play. They don't want to just endlessly practice and then never play. So I try to schedule as many matches as I can. And then I always tell the kids, look, we're playing all these matches because, hey, that's one less practice. And then they're like, hey, that's pretty cool. And then there's less planning that I have to do of practices. So there's an additional benefit there. But anyway, I'll have like one of the things that I try to do every year is get my players to come to the net more. So I'll do like a little 10, 15 minute drill, and then the next day I'll have planned something where they're going to do the drill for a shorter period of time, then play a game, right? But then I get to the end of practice and I reflect back on how the drill went, and either it went faster than I thought and we advanced more than I thought we would, so I adjust tomorrow's schedule, or it was exactly how I thought it would go, so it stays the same. Or I realize, not enough of the kids have the skill that they need, and they couldn't execute the drill. So tomorrow I have to regress a little bit. I have to teach maybe a little more volley technique, or, transition footwork to the net, so that then they can execute the drill and gain confidence from it, so that then we can go forward. So, whatever happened today, evaluating today and realizing, hey, how does this affect the change in tomorrow's schedule? And at some point you have to realize, okay, it's like, okay, wait a minute, we have this big match coming up like in 2 weeks. So I have to get all my objectives done this week, because next week I just only want them to be, getting ready for that match. I don't want them to be thinking about all sorts of new stuff. So planning in not only when are you going to teach, but when are you going to let their game be their game? So, and this is where, I try to stay within a very modified periodized schedule that I make of, we go through the the preparation phase, the pre-competitive phase, the competitive phase, and then we'll have like a little active rest thing. But depending on how they're performing, I will change the objectives.
Yeah, I agree. There's always the balance of coaches that either spend too much time playing or too much time drilling without getting them to own the elements of your teaching in a competitive environment. What's the name of your cat?
Corky Creamsicle. because look at he has a corkscrew tail. Woo. All right, no
Nice.
extra entertainment right there. Sorry to interrupt you, Dave.
That's all right. Yeah, we always love our creatures.
Corky is incorrigible. Anyway.
But anyway, that's something that coaches have got to make sure you have within that framework of your practice session. How much competition, and then and then competitions that focus on one aspect, like you talked about coming to the net. We do a thing where our doubles players have to play each other 4 games. They have to play 4 games where the returner has to hit down the line, which we don't encourage in a match, but we want the net player to get a lot of volleys. Then we play 4 games where the net player must poach and the returner player must hit across court. So I know I'm hitting across court and I know that player is going, but again, you're forcing them to get out of that box, that comfortable box of sitting here going, oh, nope, couldn't get that one. Nope, can't get that one. And they're just watching balls. They never understand what they can and can't get until you put them in a point of, I must do it over and over. And then they're like, oh, I can get that. And so those are all neat.
I want to break in on that because I want to throw a reflective practice into what you just said because so you would do that and then you would look which one did they execute better. Right. And if they executed one of them like perfectly, then drop it. Right. But if there was one they really struggled with, then I would do that again until they started to show some mastery.
Right.
And then they might go, well, coach, how come we're not doing the other one? I'm like, well, you already showed you're almost perfect at it. I mean, what else do you want? Right. So we have to get better at the stuff that we're not as good at. Right. Yeah. Cause teenagers tend to gravitate towards that, but yeah, I mean, that's a great example. One of my inspirations is this guy, the De La Salle football coach. And his whole thing was like practicing to perfection. Right. And so if there was a play that they didn't get right, and it ended that day and it wasn't right, they didn't like stay, for hours and hours until they got it right, but they did pick it up the next day. It was the first thing they did the next day. Let's get this right before we move on. I think that's a really good practice. So now we got about 20 minutes left here. What are some other reflective practices that we can use as coaches to gain the lessons that we need to gain?
Well, how many coaches read books on tennis? Unfortunately, you and I both have written books on tennis, but how many? And there are, it's really rewarding and refreshing to talk to a coach who has actually read your book or anybody else's book. But again, so many I'm a far better coach than I was 35 years ago. And part of that is a balance between going to many conferences. Yeah, I lecture at a lot of them, but boy, I sure like to listen to a lot of coaches share their words of wisdom and experience. I have 117 books on tennis, including yours, Bill. Obviously we live in an age now that we didn't have 40 years ago. And that was, we have YouTube videos, we've got podcasts, we've got, whatever internet services that can enlighten us more. USTA produces hundreds of videos. Some are so-so, but some are all good. But reflective wise, do you know what you should know? Are other coaches being more successful year in and year out? Because if they are, what are they doing differently? How can I learn from them? How can I improve my program so that, and part of a program is not just the technical side, it is the things we've talked about here and other times. So I think coaches need to step back and say, you know what? I'm going to really work on listening to some other coaches and reading up on some technical stuff of whether it's a book or watching some DVD or if they even have those anymore, streaming
Yeah.
services, whatever. But again, spending the time to understand the game maybe a little better. But that's, again, coaches need to learn they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and you're making me think about two people who probably have been the most influential people on my team coaching, and they are Wayne Bryan and Dick Gould. And there's one word that is common between the two of them, and it is fun, right?
Yep.
So, and both of them are great advocates for making it enjoyable. And when in my first coaching stop, I was just way too serious. I was young. I was like 26 years old. So, even that is pretty close in age to the kids themselves. It's harder the closer you are in age to them. And when you're new, you tend to, I think it's tempting to want to be taken seriously. And so then when you want to be taken seriously, then you become too serious. So, I think it was 95, I met Wayne Bryan for the first time and saw his thing about making it fun. And so I just made up my mind. I'm like, no matter what I do from now on, I'm going to make it fun. And then Dick Gould tells this story about how after his second national championship at Stanford, he wasn't having fun. So he got done winning his second national title, which should make people ecstatic. And he immediately started worrying about other teams that had hotshot freshmen coming in and how he was graduating some of his best players. And, oh no, now we're vulnerable, right? And so he made himself kind of miserable. So he decided then he was going to make it fun. And he says the first question, and I do this, first question after a player comes off the court is, did you have fun? And my first question at the end of practice to the kids as we're wrapping up is, did you have fun? And I'll tell you what, if there's been a day when I sort of had to get after them and discipline them, that's usually not the most fun day. But one thing that surprises me is after we've had a tough day on the court where people were misbehaving and I kind of had to discipline them, but then we recovered and actually ended up having, saving practice and having a decent practice, how some kids will say they had fun. And I'm like, are you lying? I'm like, really? But so, you can't discount the fact that some kids are really going to enjoy it when the coach is working to create a really good learning environment and not one that's like undisciplined and out of control. Because some of your kids are really going to hate that if your practice is not planned well and there's too much chaos and kids are goofing off and being unsafe.
I've talked about this in my books and at lectures. You need to know that fun is defined by many different descriptions, and the perception of fun. If you're a hit and giggle kind of coach, where you're not teaching disciplined strokes and you're not teaching technique that is initially very difficult, challenging, frustrating. If you're avoiding that because it's no fun to fail, but if you can't teach those things, even in the failure aspect, and still create a success within the failure, then you're going to only produce a bunch of kids that are good at being bad. And I've mentioned that many, many times that, the hit and giggle fun is only going to produce kids that hit and giggle. It's instantaneous fun. It is not sustainable, and it doesn't produce good players. And your good players who want to be challenged and want to learn technique are going to go, why am I going to stick around in this circus of a coach? And they're going to leave. So you're only going to attract the kids that that aren't disciplined enough to actually overcome the challenging aspects of tennis. But it's amazing that when you teach technical skills that are challenging. There is a huge lifetime fun aspect that they accomplish it. It's like playing the piano and you finally play, whatever, Flight of the Bumblebee, or, The Entertainer, which was one of my favorite piano songs when my daughter was, I said, honey, I need you to learn The Entertainer. I love that song from the Sting. And she did it. And she was so excited that she worked on it. And now she's a lifetime piano player as well as a world-class golfer and a tennis player. And, there's the fun. There's that lifetime fun. Yeah. So I agree 100% that, while you can create enjoyable elements of every practice, no matter how hard that practice is, if you can't make it a rewarding fun, then you probably, again, shouldn't be coaching tennis.
Yeah. Let's dig deeper into that because, it can be misinterpreted. So, I always tell people, all right, boring is over here, goofy is over here, and fun is in the middle, right? So we're not here to be goofy. And, one thing that I've noticed, if I've taken over a program where the kids haven't had a lot of success, they tended to do this defense mechanism thing where they miss a shot horribly and then they laugh, right? And then I'm like, okay. And so as soon as that starts happening, I pull a team meeting together, especially if one kid laughs at another kid, right? So I bring them together. I'm like, that's over. Okay. So we'll laugh when something's funny. We'll laugh when like something amazing happens, like the ball hits the net and goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it goes, right? Or if somebody hits a shot and the ball bounces off their racket 6 times, or whatever, right? Or if the ball hits a bird in midair, we'll laugh. Okay. But we're not laughing at ourselves and we're not going to laugh at other people. Right. And the reason, maybe you don't know that the reason you do that is to protect yourself against disappointment. But what we're going to do is we're going to learn to play better tennis, and then you'll be able to laugh because you're playing better. And you should see, you can imagine the looks on these kids, as they're being presented that they've never thought about it. And they kind of go, they're like, who is this guy? Why is he so serious? Right. And I'm like, no, we're going to have fun. The other thing too, is that, I always like to end every practice with a large group game. And then, that's a lot of fun, especially when people hit great shots and everybody's like clapping for them. And, we're all together enjoying that as a team. So I try to dedicate 15 to 20 minutes at the end of every practice to something fun. So it's kind of like eating dessert after you had your vegetables. Right. And so then, then kids go mid-practice, they go, oh, can we play bump, bump, bump? Right. I'm like, well, no, because we haven't had our vegetables yet. And then there's some games that I play that are incredibly silly, and they make the kids split their guts. I mean, people, it's just so hilarious to play tennis volleyball, right? But we don't start playing tennis volleyball until there's less than a month left in the season. But what ends up happening is, day one, they're like, can we play tennis volleyball? I'm like, no, that doesn't happen until October, so, or mid-September at the very earliest, because if we do that, then you're just going to be silly and you're just going to want to play it all the time. It's a funny game that we play because it's a way of relieving stress at the end of the season, so having some balance. And then, I don't know, I think we've talked about this before about, when, like, let's say you're having a water break and it's a 5-minute break and you can see that the kids are just really having a great time. They're laughing, and kids who don't normally talk to each other are talking to each other. And you just tell that there's this magical bonding thing going on, right? And so even though your timer went off that said 5 minutes is up, I say let it continue. I'm like, I'll go, hey, are you kids having fun? They're like, yeah. I'm like, all right, well, how much longer do you want this break to be? 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or 10 minutes? And they go 10 minutes. I'm like, no, pick 3 or 5, right? Because we're not here to descend into chaos, right? And then it's like, all right, bring it back from the edge. Okay, you were having fun. Now we need to refocus on what we're doing here. And then the message is, yes, there is a social time built into the practice, but now it's over.
Yep. Well, I say if you have to tell your kids, we're going to have fun today, I kind of shake my head a little bit, because you shouldn't have to tell them what they're going to do.
Right. Just
Hopefully
do it.
they're enjoying. I mean, if you know your game, if you know how to coach, and you know how to create enjoyable drills, enjoyable competitive elements, and know how to break it up correctly, they're going to have fun. You don't have
Yeah.
to sell it. You don't have to be like a politician going, the economy's doing great.
Yeah.
You don't have to go through that, because if you're good at what you do, they're gonna. One thing I've really enjoyed, and I'll close with this, and that is how many kids leave practice saying, "Thanks, coach, that was a great practice." No, I didn't prior, feed them a line to say that. How many were sincerely came off the court feeling like, A, they're a better player, B, they got in better shape, C, they enjoyed their time together with their team and their coaching.
Yeah. You kind of you want them to have a buzz as they're leaving, and you want them to look forward to coming back tomorrow, because it always ends well. Because if
Right.
it ends on a bummer, that's a drag. But
I see parents all the time. Let me add that, because this is
yeah.
important. Coaching and parenting. If you're a parent taking a kid out to drill or teach them tennis, whatever you're doing, and you've gone out there so long they got a blister, and that's what they remember from their tennis time with mom and dad or their coach, do you think they're going to look forward to tennis? So I tell coaches and parents all the time, make sure you leave where the kid is essentially having a great time, and then they're like saying, can we keep going? And you're like, no, but we're going to do that first thing tomorrow during practice. So now guess what? Now it's a whole different mindset of them looking forward, rather than going, I'm so sore, my arm hurts, my blister hurts, I'm whatever. I mean, you get kids that are wimps and snowflakes, but that's, not very often.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to future success. And I don't think we're going to go really deep into this one, but you do have to look ahead, and there's only so much future planning you can do, because you don't know who's going to move out of town. You don't know who's going to switch to another sport, maybe. You don't know who's going to get injured, which is sad, right? There's so many unknowns, right? But like, one mistake I think coaches make is sometimes they don't plan far enough ahead. So they'll have like all of their single starters will be seniors, right? And then they all graduate, and then you have to come up with all new single starters, right? So I always like to make sure that let's say we have 3 or 4 singles players, I always like to make sure at least one of them is a junior, and if I can get that lowest spot to be a sophomore, now we've got continuity through the lineup. I mean, you don't want to compromise your strength, but, planning ahead that way. And then, if you're a team where you absolutely have to cut players because you have limited space, and, there's just an absolute limit to how many you can have, I would recommend that you find a way to keep, a sophomore or a freshman, on your team, so that they can have that continuity and be someone who comes through for 3 or 4 years, in order to help build your program. Because, one year I took over a team that all the varsity players except for one were seniors. And so the next year, and then the one junior since all of her friends graduated, decided not to play. So now I'm taking over a team of kids who the best they've ever done is play JV tennis, and now they're all varsity. That was brutal, right? But the interesting thing was, even so, we still ended up having like a 500 season, and we beat a team loaded with seniors. So we made the most of it. But plan ahead so that you don't end up with all of a sudden like all your whole team graduated because you didn't keep players at enough different grade levels to have that continuity. So, and then as you're thinking about who's going to play what positions, like, okay, maybe this player's going to drop down into doubles next year. Maybe that player's going to have to play singles. Well, give them some experience the year before, or let them know, okay, you're going to have to go play some tournaments of singles so that you can be ready to play singles, because it's likely that you're going to be in there, right? And or ask kids, hey, next year, what do you aspire to? What's the highest you think you can go on this team next year? And get them thinking about that so that they can start gaining the skills and preparing mentally for that.
Yeah, the way we ran our challenges daily, our singles challenges daily, we kind of didn't have to do that. The ladder established itself, and so then because the JV all play doubles, basically all of our JV matches are doubles matches. They've already experienced that. So the singles ladder concept creates that ability to play singles. They're going to get plenty of doubles action if they're not a varsity player. And we tell our players, our top 7 are going to be varsity. 3 of you are going to be singles, 4 of you are going to be doubles players. And we're going to together create the team that we feel can win state every year. And so these players all know that they could play singles or they could play doubles. My number 1 singles player, Morgan, her senior year, said, "Coach, if you need me to play doubles, I'll play doubles." They know that the culture of our team is a team thing. It's not, I'm number 1 singles, I'm going to play singles, and you're not going to change that. Well, that person's not going to last on my team. I can guarantee that. They'll mature out of it, or they'll move on. But the idea of having that concept of players easily integrating from singles to doubles or doubles to singles is a critical factor, regardless of age. I've had number 1 players who are freshmen, seniors. My number 1 doubles team was actually the year before that one was my number 1 singles player, played number 1 doubles with another senior and went undefeated. And had a wonderful season and a wonderful career. She was 4-year varsity, but she played doubles her senior year. And so that's something to think about.
I want to end with a quick story because it puts everything together. It's a little bit of evaluation and reflection and planning. So I had this kid, Kyle, and his mother was my assistant coach. And she often advocated for her son. Right. And so, eventually I had to tell her to cool it because she wasn't getting anywhere with that. But anyway, but Kyle was good enough to be a starting singles player on the team. But the problem was he had an injury in his pec. He had a pretty strange, like, muscle tear in the inner part of his pectoral. So, in order to manage that and to have him hitting fewer balls, I had him in doubles with his friend, right? So, and so we were just trying to manage his injury. And he's also a very good doubles player, but he was good enough to be, the 2nd or 3rd best player on the team. So anyway, we get through the season, and he comes into the next season 100% healthy, and I went to Kyle and I said, "Hey, what do you want to do this year? Because I know you were disappointed last year that you didn't get to play singles. And that was largely a function of, us managing your injury. So what do you want to do?" And, so I didn't have to wait for his mom to ask me if he could play singles. I already knew, right? And I was ahead of it. So So then I went to him and he said, you know what, coach, you know what? I actually do want to stay in doubles because Andrew and I are a great team and I enjoy playing with him. Yeah, I appreciate you asking me about singles. And but not only that, but you can count on us for a W, So I mean the next year they only lost one match all season. So when you have a W that you can write into your scorecard every time, and now it's like, all right, now you guys are going to have to beat us in 4 of the remaining 6 matches,
right?
Because you will not beat our number 1 doubles team, right? That's very reassuring, right?
Yep.
And then the interesting thing is then Kyle and I already struck this agreement, and then Kyle's mom was like, "Is Kyle going to play singles this year?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's who wants Kyle to play singles. Kyle's mom, not Kyle." Right. So I'd already planned it. We already put it in place. And so then I was like, well, I already talked to Kyle and he said he wanted to play doubles. So why don't you guys sort that out? Right. No, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation. Right. But anyway, it was sorted. And so it was the evaluation, it was the reflection, and it was the planning. And then, I avoided this ongoing tension with my assistant coach because of all that. So that's where I am today. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered a lot of material on this aspect, and again, just as a coach, giving yourself time to reflect and plan from all this feedback that you've got and all the experience you gained from coaching this year. You're going to be a better coach. Be a confident coach, not arrogant, but a confident coach, because there is a big difference between a confident coach, because usually a confident coach is far quieter, says less, does more, is more in tune with their players than an arrogant coach or a cocky coach, if you will. And I've seen too many of those in my career in 3 different states. So I hope all of you are listening will be able to reflect on what we've shared with you today and maybe take it to that next level for your season next year.
Yeah. And so, okay, I do have one more thing I have to say now that you said that. So I was in Florida and I was speaking at the Florida High School Coaches Conference. I hope to get back there again someday. But I was talking to a 2nd-year coach and I was like, "Hey, how's it going? What's going on with your season? What are some of the things you're learning?" And he's like, "Oh," he said, "I don't know. I feel like kind of an imposter. Like they're going to discover that I'm not very good." And then I was like, "Oh, wow. Well, I'm 30 years in and nobody figured me out." So I think that's another, to wrap up, everybody's got a little imposter syndrome in them somewhere. So yeah, it's just kind of to underline what Dave's saying. Just take the lessons that you learned this year, get a little bit better, and it's gonna end up going well as if you follow these principles of taking a little time to evaluate, reflect, and plan. All right. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, you guys.